It's a Guy Jeans podcast.
Hey, you guys, welcome to the podcast. My guest today is April Vokey. April is host of the super popular podcast, Anchor Outdoors with April Vokey. She's an accomplished fly fishing guide, TV personality, as well as a wife and a mom. She spends half the year in Australia and half the year in her home province of British Columbia. On this podcast, it's super cool. We talk about her early childhood and fishing, becoming a fishing guide, and her love of steelhead and fishing for them. We also talk about her becoming a fly casting instructor, and she gives great advice to aspiring fly casting instructors and up-and-coming fly fishing guides. This is a good one, guys. So sit back and enjoy my conversation with April Vokey. Hi, April. How you doing?
I'm fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Are you in Australia right now?
I am. It's morning. I'm a little nervous. I haven't had enough coffee, but
Really? What time is it there?
working my way through a cup now. Oh, look, it's 9 a.m., but my daughter was up coughing all night, so it was just one of those nights.
Oh, really? Yeah. It's 4 o'clock here in California, so it's crazy how that works out, huh?
Yeah. I'm back in Canada tomorrow. I fly back tomorrow, so getting ready to be on the same time schedule as you.
Wow.
The time zone as you.
What are you doing in Australia? Are you fishing? Are you hanging out there? What's going on?
Oh, my husband's Australian. So when we met, we were both pretty established in our lives. And so we just agreed to kind of split our lives up. So that's what we do.
Oh, that's cool. Are you fishing there too with him? And
Yeah. There's really, I will say, Australia's got probably the most underrated fishery in the world as far as like popular places, as far as I'm concerned.
Really? What are you guys fishing for there?
Everything. So it's one of those really cool places where you can go fishing for rainbow trout and then the same day go marlin fishing.
No way.
Yeah, it's crazy. But no, they've got everything from the snowy mountains with like I said, trout, and there's Murray cod, which are only found here. All the offshore species. So obviously sailfish, marlin, there's giant trevally, there's Indo-Pacific permit,
Wow.
barramundi, bass, estuary perch, tons and tons and tons of species.
Oh my God, that sounds so fun.
Yeah, but a lot of it, you'll hear people say, oh, I went to Sydney and yeah, there was no fishing. There is fishing in Sydney, but you've got to have access to a boat for most of the fisheries.
Yeah. Wow.
And so that obviously puts some people off, but they're there.
Yeah. And so you grew up in British Columbia, and so you're kind of going back and forth. And where did you grow up in British Columbia?
I grew up in Surrey, British Columbia. And so everyone who has been or is from BC knows what I mean when I kind of laugh a little bit, but it's out of Vancouver.
Okay.
And then obviously with Surrey being a little bit rough, I got out of Surrey and moved out to Chilliwack, which is kind of like a country town, or used to be a country town. And fishing is great there for salmon and steelhead. And then from there, just kind of kept migrating north, and now I'm up near Smithers on the Bulkley River.
When you say rough, what do you mean by that?
Oh, look, Surrey has a bit of a reputation.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm with you. Okay, got it.
Yeah, but I will say Surrey was the perfect launch pad for my career because I grew up with a pretty rough crowd, and I had seen a lot of stuff, and it was back in the day. I mean, this is before the internet, so people a lot of the times weren't held accountable. No one had camera phones or anything. So it was kind of the Wild West, especially with young men. And so then to go into the fly fishing industry, I felt like I had my armor on. I was ready for anything that was thrown my way. So it wasn't a bad thing.
Huh. That's cool. What is it about the fly fishing thing when you were young? How did you get into that? I mean, you're growing up there in Surrey, and then all of a sudden you just got a fly rod, or your parents gave you a fly rod, and you started to get into it?
No, God, no. No. So look, we fished. Like my dad and we would go on, the typical family camping trip. My parents admittedly, they spent a lot of time with us outside. Sorry if I'm getting my steps in while I'm talking to you. So I sound
Cool.
like I'm
Out of
running a
breath.
marathon. But yeah, so we spent a lot of time out in the wild and on the rivers. And we would go camping in the summer, and Dad and I would troll worms, and I just loved hanging out with Dad. It's a pretty typical story. Loved hanging out with Dad. I loved gutting fish and seeing what the fish had been eating.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mom and Dad took me to the Chilliwack River one day, and it was a salmon migration, and I saw this big, beautiful, dead Chinook salmon. It hadn't rotted out. It was still fresh. It must have bumped its head or had some sort of injury while being released. I don't know, but it was shiny and still had its scales, and I was in awe. And Mom and Dad explained that they had to get across the river, and the river was only like 30 feet wide where we were. And obviously, as a young kid, I'm going, well, I can access it. If the river is only from here to there, maybe I can catch a fish like that. And so that was kind of how it all started. And from there, it was mostly salmon fishing that took over in my life, not fly fishing. So went out with a spinning rod, blew the gears on the spinning rod right away. I'm going to sit down so that I don't make myself totally out of breath here. This is the thing about turning 40. It's just like, I've got to get everything. I got to stay in shape.
Get in there, yeah.
But yeah, no, so I just loved fishing and spin fishing. And then eventually when I blew out, sorry, the cockatoos are behind me and they're
cool.
They like to be interviewed. So yeah, I blew out the spinning rod and needed to buy a bait caster and couldn't believe how expensive bait casters were. So I spent a lot of time just working, trying to pay for my first bait caster. And then from there, it kind of just evolved. You know, I then got into centerpin fishing and I loved that. Sorry.
Oh, no worries.
And, and then one day I was just it had been a few years of fishing. Oh, and I'm leaving out a pivotal part of the story. I had, in that first year or two, I had met a man on the river named Dave. And Dave was older. And I mean, he probably was 60 then. And I was in my teens. And he asked he said, you know, I see you all the time and it can be dangerous for a young woman. And I'm rolling my eyes thinking, yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm going to trust you. And one day I did. I actually thought, you know what? He's not wrong. Maybe I should fish with this guy. And he used to own a tackle shop and he knew what he was talking about. And anyway, so Mom and Dad followed me out the first time I fished with him. And they kind of spied on us from across the river. And they really liked Dave. And so Dave became my first fishing buddy. And then I had on one of my solo trips seen these guys fly fishing on the lower Chilliwack River, the Vedder River, and was just in love. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was so just beautiful. And I told Dave about it. And Dave was like, well, I've got this old Shakespeare fly rod from when I had the shop. Would you like it? And obviously I did. And so he gave me that and some VHS tapes on casting. I didn't have a reel yet, so I had to go get my own reel. And then from there, the rest just kind of took over and I became a fly fisher.
Isn't it cool, the folks that, like, you know, it seems like people get into, you know, whatever genre sport or whatever it is, you know, it's usually some mentor like that like gives somebody a fly rod, you know, like that same thing happened to me, you know, when I was a little kid and some guy just said, hey, do you want a fly rod? I'm like, yeah. And then it grows and they don't understand that we turn into monsters.
Yeah, no, seriously. And he was just so supportive all the way through, you know, and yeah, I don't think Dave fishes that much now. And we did kind of lose contact, you know, years go by and everyone gets busy. But it's just all it takes is one person and showing a little bit of faith in you too, right? Because there were a lot of nasty people on the river. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to fish with Dave. Yeah. When he said, you know, you're out here all the time, it was at the point where I was starting to think maybe it would be safer to have a fishing buddy. And it just was so cool to be able to share the experience. And he's also who got me into steelhead fishing. So we were sitting there one day and we were drinking out of our Stanley thermoses for coho at the time. And I was getting really depressed. I wasn't feeling right and I couldn't put my finger on it. And he was like a fatherly figure. So I'm trying to explain to him how I'm feeling. And he said, well, it's because the season's dying down. Because I didn't want it to end.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
And he said, it doesn't have to end. I said, what do you mean it doesn't have to end? It's November. He said, steelhead. What are you talking? What's the steelhead? And then he told me all about the steelhead and how they start entering when the salmon are gone. And he said, although he didn't do it, it was too cold, just a little bit too much for him. And, you know, he was a harvestable. He liked to harvest his fish and you could keep a hatchery fish, but it was a lot of work. That was it. He put me onto steelhead and I was literally never the same again. And from there started discovering the Thompson and all these other amazing fisheries. And yeah, the whole evolution just it was just a natural progression, I guess.
So what rivers are there that you were fishing in your little area?
Yeah, so at the time, so that was the Chilliwack, the Stamp. There were some rivers on the island that I had gone over to do.
Pretty big
There was a
area,
bunch
huh?
of near Vancouver. Yeah, Squamish. There were a bunch
Okay.
of kind of rivers there. And then there was the Thompson. So I don't know. You obviously being in California
Yeah.
probably know that there's two different, well, three steelhead, but typically you've got a winter and a summer run steelhead.
Sure.
And so the winter run fish is how I kind of got my introduction to steelhead. But then I had heard about this summer run fishery because around this time, all of this is happening at the same time that internet forums had just started. Not me getting into steelhead, but me getting into summer run steelhead. There was an internet post by somebody and they said the T. And I was so confused. And I had only discovered this forum because Dave had slowed down. We'd had a few years of, like I said, of fishing together, and he started to slow down. And I was looking for a fishing buddy, and I couldn't find any. I wanted to fish with women. I've always kind of been a girl's girl. I love men, but I've always been a girl's girl, especially out in the bush. And so I was looking for other women to hang out with. And so I had heard about, I think it was like fishbc.com or something. And was trying to find a woman to go, a group of women to go fishing with, because there were no clubs at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was going through all the posts, I saw this pretty argumentative post, which of course is quite interesting when you're young and new to all this stuff. And everyone's arguing about this river called the T. And what the hell's the T? And it was the Thompson. And it was still it was still quiet enough where nobody said it by its name, right? It's like, which should kind of date, I'm kind of dating this whole era. But so the Thompson was where I finally decided I was going to go for the big league. And so at that time I had, let's see, because when I met Dave, I was still I wasn't at the casino yet. So by the time that Dave had slowed down and I kind of, quote unquote, become a woman, I was probably, I would have been 20. Yeah, I was 20. I was at the casino. And so I was working at the casino from 8:30 till 4:30 in the morning, 8:30 at night to 4:30 a.m. So I was able to have the day to fish. And when you're 20, you don't sleep. You're like,
Sure.
all-nighters just fuel you. So I would drive to the Thompson and fish, and that was it for me. That was when I discovered two-handed rods, really big, wild steelhead, summer summer fish. Even though it's a winter setting, they're still summer run fish. And that was and that was also when photos, I started to fish with some of my buddies from the hilltop. I ended up having a boyfriend at some point who fished and was able to get some decent photos. About the same time, digital cameras came around. So all of a sudden, you've got some pretty decent photos. It wasn't that long after. I think it was 2 years after kind of Facebook came out. And so then suddenly everything just, as far as a career, started to spread like wildfire. I'd already known at that point that I wanted to be a guide, but then everything kind of just happened overnight as far as getting into it professionally.
So then you were doing all that stuff, and then you decided, hey, I'm going to be a guide. Is that how you got into guiding?
Well, yeah. I'd known I wanted to guide since I was 18, right? I'd work at the Olive Garden. I'd be at the Olive Garden going, this is so stupid. I don't want to do this. And because remember, you have to, even though you're working nights, you've got to be there at 4:00.
Yeah.
If you're really lucky, you could get the 5:30 shift, but you're still, by the time that you drive from the river, you're leaving at 3:00. Yeah. So right. I didn't want to, and I knew that I should probably get a real career. I went back to school to be a biologist, and there's lots of little rabbit holes we could fall in here, but I knew from an early age that I wanted to work professionally in fishing. And the only way to do that, especially at the time, was to be a guide. And the only way to be a guide was you had to actually know what you were doing. And so you had to be out there really putting your time in and getting to know your fishery. Yeah. And you had to be taken seriously, and people had to know who you were. So it was this real mix of trying to become knowledgeable. I mean, that I spent, like I said, from 18 till 21 or 22. I feel like that's all I did. And then when I had the opportunity to market with the internet, I took the opportunity and never looked back.
Do you remember your first guide trip?
Well, yeah. So I started guiding for another operator at the time. I didn't have my own guide license. Couldn't afford it. Number of reasons, being quite young. And I had, I was working at a tackle shop just for discounts on gear. And I had run into a couple, you start talking about guiding with certain people at the shop, and I'd wanted to guide for kind of this bigwig operator, and he did offer me a job. Now, at the time, it wasn't the sort of guiding I wanted to do. I wanted to guide for Steelhead. I'm not particularly, I'm not a huge fan of boats. I find them quite intimidating, to be honest. But and I wanted to just be on foot. But he offered me a guiding gig on the Fraser River for sturgeon and salmon, and so I took the opportunity. So my first few years was, just I was a guide on the Fraser and the Harrison River. Pretty lousy guide, to be honest. I wouldn't call myself the best sturgeon guide, but I was learning a lot, and I knew it was valuable.
Sure.
And I was learning a lot about what I liked about the business and what I didn't like. And so, before long, I broke off, and in 2007, I started Fly Gal and got my own guide license and went independent.
So Fly Gal, is that like a bunch of gals, or just you, or what is that? What's Fly Gal?
Well, Fly Gal, Fly Gal, it's such a silly name looking back now. Like, it's one of those names where I love it and I'm proud of it, because in 2007, it really meant a lot to me, but I look back now and it sounds so ridiculous. But no, I didn't know what to call my company at the time. I was doing a number of little things on the side. I was doing some writing for some magazines, and I was the rep for Vossler, and for tax purposes and for write-offs and stuff, I needed to register a company. And my license plate on my truck was Fly Gal, and so I just called the business Fly Gal Ventures. Because I was working at the casino at that time, all the girls would be like, well, take us. And so we'd go out and have these amazing trips, and they really helped me to better understand how to be a guide on foot on the water without a boat. And so I just kind of kept the name. I was quite happy to mostly guide women, but before long, it was men and women. And Fly Gal, I guided Fly Gal for 10 years, and it was how it went.
I remember the first time that my very first guide trip, I was like really nervous. Were you nervous like the very first time? Were you tripping out?
Oh my God. Okay. So yes. And I'll tell you why. So the first, oh no, that's right. Okay. Yes. So it's 2007. And was it 2007 or 2008? I can't remember exactly. Hang on. Let me get my timeline here.
Okay.
I don't know if that was my first, I can't remember if this was my first or my second year. In doing the timing, I think it would have to have been my second year of guiding. No, it was my first, because that's right. So I started Fly Gal 2007, and it was not guiding as such. Fly Gal was registered, but it was just for, like I said, for being the rep and everything else. It wasn't for guiding. So I started guiding for a different operation a little bit late. I think it was 2008 I started guiding for them. Anyway, I'd have to put it all together. I got in a car accident, and it was right before I was supposed to go on this guiding trip.
Oh, man.
Was I guiding then? Shit, I'm trying to think if I was guiding in 2008. Anyway, in 2008, I had a really bad car accident, and I ended up in my truck. Is that right? I'm trying to do the math, because I've had two different situations. I had one where my truck was totaled in a car accident, and two where I bought a lemon. This truck it had been smuggled in from America, and the frame was bent, and this, that, and the other thing. Anyway, here's what I do remember about one of my first real moments of oh shit. So I am guiding for this bigwig operator. I'm no longer just doing little piddly walk-and away trips as a test. I'm officially in a jet boat, and it is like my full season. I've got 60 days booked in a row. I am going to go hard this season. I don't have a truck. I can't remember, like I said, if it was the accident or the bent frame in the other truck. All my years are muddled. But I didn't have a truck, and the guy at Craftsman Collision, the local Craftsman Collision, gave me his personal vehicle to use for the season, which was one of those Hummers. And it was one of those brand new Hummers, the ones where it was brand new at the time, where it was almost like a Lego piece where you can't see shit out the windows.
Right.
And so I am. And remember, I'm still cocktailing at the casino at this point. And so I've got long blonde hair, and this would have been before the car accident. That's right. This would have all been way before the car accident. It's all kind of coming back to me now. This would have been the lemon vehicle, not the car accident vehicle. So I'm bright blonde hair, long fake nails, basically just coming in from work at the casino, and I'm at a boat launch surrounded by men who know what they're doing. These are really great sturgeon guides. I've already told you I'm intimidated by boats, and I'm not great as a sturgeon guide. And now this blonde-haired Barbie is in a brand new Hummer with this beautiful jet boat, and everybody is watching me, and I am like, I have no clue what I'm doing, backing up. And I mean, I was able to make it work, but it was absolutely terrifying. And it was one of those moments where you just wish that you weren't flashy at all. You just don't want anyone to look at you at the boat launch. I can't remember my first day of guiding, but I do remember that first scenario of all eyes on me and me really wishing to God that I just was in like an old, ranger with brown hair.
Could you back up the boat? Or was it pretty hard? Were you having a hard time?
Yeah. No. I was able. I had put in enough time beforehand. I knew going in, and to be fair, even though my boss was a total dickhead, but he, to be fair, was also prepared and I'd had the boat, the previous season, and I'd been out there and I'd been practicing and getting better at it and trying to learn how to operate it. So it was definitely. I think it was still smooth enough. I didn't do anything too stupid, but I just remember being really, really nervous.
Hey, so describe to me what it's like to catch a steelhead in British Columbia. What's it like for you?
Oh, that's a loaded question. On a bait caster, on a fly?
On a fly. Yeah.
It depends where you're at. My first steelhead on a fly was on the lower Vetter in the canal down there, and it was amazing. I was satisfied and proud of myself and in awe, but it was nothing compared to my first steelhead on a fly on the Thompson. Those fish are just a whole different beast. Look, it just depends where you're at. There are fish, and then there are fish, right? Yeah.
So they're big too, right? The ones in the Thompson.
Have you not caught a steelhead yet?
No, I've caught steelhead down here, but I haven't been up in British Columbia. That's why I'm curious. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, they're those hot summer fish.
Yeah. In
those big rivers, because you need to also look at the river itself and the gradient on the rivers. If it's a river where there's a lot of waterfalls involved or a lot of steep gradient, then those fish are built different.
Yeah.
And the tail on a Thompson fish, I mean, I've got really big hands for a woman, and I almost can't get my hand wrapped around a tail on we call them square tailers. They're just a whole different breed of animal.
So when you guys are fishing for them, are you doing like the cast and swing kind of a technique where you're casting, then you take a step and kind of do it that way?
Yeah, technically.
Yeah.
Look, it depends. I think a true angler, does more than just casts and swings, but that's probably how it would look maybe on the bank. But a lot of, dump a little bit here, high stick a little bit there, walk it through here.
And are you guys using using two-handed rods mostly when you're up there? Or?
Yeah. I'm gonna experiment with that though this year, and I think go back to a little bit of single hand stuff. I think the more time that I've spent in the Southern Hemisphere fishing for very technical fish, like in Tasmania and New Zealand, the fish are extremely technical. I've really come to appreciate just how, not necessarily spooky they are, but just, I guess how spooky they are, and also how close they are to the bank. And I think that a lot of us enjoy casting so much, myself included, that we tend to spend our time focusing on casting as far as we can, but not necessarily as efficiently as we can. So, and I obviously that's something I take into consideration every year, but I think this year I'm going to really go to an extreme and fish like 20 feet in front of myself and just see what happens.
So when you're guiding for those steelhead and you've got a client and stuff, and down here in California and in kind of Southern Oregon and stuff, people call it you cast 1,000 times before you actually get hit and stuff. Is it kind of like that up there too, or when you find them, they're there and you guys are just focusing on them in that run?
Yeah, I definitely don't think they're a fish of 1,000 casts.
Yeah.
I mean, that was what appealed to me about them. But when they're there, they're very aggressive. I mean, sorry, I'm just going to ignore a call here. A few years ago, I caught a fish and and busted the fly off. Mm-hmm. And then my husband went through like 5 minutes later and caught the same fish. And we know because my fly was in its mouth. And so I don't know if they're necessarily, and to their own detriment, if they're that hard, or if it's just simply that they're not there, which is a whole different depressing story.
Mm-hmm. What about like when you're guiding, like for me, I've had some amazing days where the stars aligned and, the people are cool and everything, is amazing. And then I've had some days where it's just kind of crazy and weird. I mean, have you had some really like crazy days, or is there a story you could tell me that you've had like on the river?
Yeah, and look,
probably a bunch of them,
huh? Yeah, but I also probably need to back myself up a little bit and just kind of clarify. And I apologize. I don't know what you guide for, if it's salmon, steelhead, stripers.
Yeah, I mean, everything, more water fish to
mako sharks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
So,
that's my friend Conway, but no, I do more like in the Sierra Mountains, trout and bass, smallmouth, and ocean stuff too. But
gotcha.
But yeah, go ahead. So I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You probably already know all this, and so I just don't want to I don't want to sound condescending at all. So, this is for people who don't know. Sure. I am probably speaking out of turn when I say, or out of line when I say that they're not a fish of 1,000 casts, because I need to again go back to their winter run fish and their summer run fish. And for people who don't know, winter run fish enter in the winter months, and summer run fish enter in the summer months. And so when the winter fish enter, there are things that make them different. So for starters, because they're entering in the winter months, everything is colder. It tends to slow down their metabolism. They also, and this is the biggest factor, they enter in a completely mature state. So they are basically full of eggs or milk. Whereas summer run fish enter in the summer months in the warmer time of year, and they are barren, right? Because of the distance in which they're traveling. So winter run fish typically dominates, tributaries within 100 miles or so from the ocean. Whereas a summer run fish can go, 8 times that. So we're looking at an entirely different scenario with winter run fish. These fish basically enter, let's just say pregnant for, to paint a picture, cold and tired. And we put them, they're still fresh. And by all means, I'm not against fishing for them, but they're holding in different water. They're typically holding in water that's slow, sluggish, something where they don't really need to move a lot. And so in that situation, when you're trying to get through, especially into a lot of these systems that are 100 miles from the ocean, it could be big water, it could be froggy, it could be, it could be busy, any number of scenarios with these fish. And so you typically have got to fish big, heavy sink tips to get down to them, maybe flies that undulate and move and have a lot of action in slow water. So that could be bunny rabbit or marabou or something that tends to hold a lot of water that could be heavy and maybe not necessarily fun to cast. So, and I've seen these fish, you can put a fly past their nose 20 times. They're not interested. So winter run fish can, yes, especially before we have all the fun things that we have now, like Skagit lines and dumbbell eyes. I mean, we've always had dumbbell eyes, but back, even when I first started fishing for steelhead, it wasn't like it is now. And they were a fish of 1,000 casts. Yeah. Summer run fish are just way more aggressive. So that's kind of my little rabbit hole of, yes, they are tricky, but not always tricky, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So going back to the best guide day to the worst guide day, what do you think?
Well, look, my best guide days were really blessed. My brother-in-law, who is probably the best guide I know, and he is one of the best guides from whether it's sturgeon, steelhead, salmon. This man is his name's Stevie Morrow, and Stevie and I were really good friends before he met my sister, and she had to make a crush on him, and so set it up. And they've been married now for I don't know, if I've been married 10 years, they've probably been married maybe 12. They've been together a long time. And Stevie and my sister were working at this lodge on the Dean. And that's right, Bob Clay, the rod builder, was the other guide, but Bob wanted to slow down. And so they were looking for another guide to come in. And so at the time I came in just as a consultant to see, what I could do to maybe help with the lodge, because it was kind of outdated and, they didn't get a lot of promotion. And I flew into the Dean and just fell in love with this place. It was one of those, you'll know this, those trips where you fly in or you go to, and then you leave and you feel empty or almost like a sense of mourning. Something's not right. You have to get back.
Sure. Absolutely.
I had to get back. And so Stevie said, well, why don't you be my other guide? And so I took the job, and for the next 4 or 5 years, it was just heavenly. I mean, I cannot begin to tell you that those days. You wake up with, first of all, you got the same crew for 7 days, and they come in every year. So we've got just an unbelievable group of clients that you truly love.
Yeah.
Then you're with your family. You're on this fishery. I don't know if you've seen the Dean, but it flows into the ocean. It's fly-in only. I mean, I guess you could take a boat in if you were really adventurous, but it flows into the ocean. You're literally landing fish in the salt water. And it's just, there's like this beautiful Grantham waterfall that falls in that you can see. There's glaciers everywhere. There's grizzly bears everywhere. The fish are enormous, and I've never in my life caught a fish that can pull like a Dean River steelhead. They're just the Thompson's amazing, but these guys, with them being so close to the ocean, like I said, they're also a whole nother, breed of animal. But so I don't know if I had any really great, I'm sure I've got great stories, but let me stew on that for a bit and I'll come back to one.
Okay. What's the craziest thing that's ever happened to you on a guide trip?
Well, have you heard of Amy Hazel?
Uh-uh.
So Amy and John Hazel own.
Oh I've heard of them. Yeah.
Deschutes Angler in Oregon.
Oh yeah.
And talking about clients that we're so blessed to fish with, Amy and her group every year. I literally just got one of those butterfly in my stomach moments, because when you just, they're great. It was a great group and a great week every year. And so Amy comes in, and it was never a dull moment with Amy around. And this year was different. She was a little bit off because her dad had died, and she was really close with her dad. And so she brings his ashes and, has a sip of whiskey and then sprinkles them into the river. We were down at the very bottom by the ocean. And I shit you not, excuse my language, within minutes, it was just like this movie. Have you ever seen The Last Unicorn, where just unicorns are rolling in front of you? It was just these steelhead came rolling in. There must have been a surge, or I don't know, maybe a gift from above, but it was, everyone was in tears. It was really special.
That's cool. Wow. So if I want you to answer this question too, because there's a lot of people out there that want to become guides, and, what advice could you give to, whether it's young ladies, young men, or even older people that want to become guides? What advice can you give to them?
It's funny because my answer now is so different than it was, 20, 15, 10 years ago. It's different now, because we were talking about this the other day. I was talking to Duck Hogan on my show, and we were talking about, how come a lot of the greats have kind of dropped off or appeared, and no one ever drops off, right? But could, from a perception stance, appear to have dropped off. And he took a deep breath and he said, it's because, like he said, I hate to say it, but it's because the steelhead, they just aren't there anymore in the way that they were before to make a living out of. And I feel like guides now, it's something that I would encourage people to be a guide, because it's for me, it made me who I am. But at the same time, you have to have two things going for you. You have to have a fishery that's sustainable. Yeah. And you have got to have a backup plan. I mean, for me, we don't talk about it very often because it's private, but I've been investing since I was 16 years old. I take my investments very seriously. And if I didn't have those, I wouldn't have ever taken the leap to gone into fishing the way that I did. And, I made sure to have a backup plan. There's a lot at play. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of looking at maybe my career or someone else's career and assuming that that's all that they do. Or, I always get a chuckle when people call me an influencer or like a social media, or someone the other day was trying to hate on me on YouTube and called me a YouTube star. I have 25,000 subscribers on YouTube. I'm lucky to make $200 a month. I think that people make the mistake assuming that your income or your security is coming through a totally different avenue than it actually is. And so I would encourage all young people to start investing now and have a backup plan to be able to exit. You know, I knew I would only guide for 10 years and I guided 10 years to the day, and then that was it. And I put it away.
What about like, I'm going to tell you a story that when I first started guiding, Yvon Chenard from Patagonia, in Ventura, I'm from Ventura, but I told him, I'm thinking about, becoming a fly fishing guide. And he's all, where? And I'm like, on the Kern River. And he's like, well, do you know the Kern River? And I'm like, I think I do, really good. He's all, and this is really kind of cool. He said, well, the best guide I know is a Native American guide up in British Columbia. And what he does every year is he snorkels his river and goes down and watches the fish and sees what they do. And I took that to heart, and I actually did that for many, many years and got in the water and looked at the trout and looked at the bass and kind of checked them out and to see what they did. And it helped me become better. And I'm hoping to tell him that again one of these days, years later, But,
how did it help you to become better, out of curiosity?
Yeah, just, looking at watching the fish. I would have somebody fish actually while I was under the water, and I would watch the flies drift in the water and see their reaction to the flies, and then I'd yell out, change the fly to a stone fly, and then they would put that on, and the fish would kind of look at it. Change it to a midge. I'd be yelling, change it to this or whatever. And I'd be underneath watching them until they finally ate it, or one came out of nowhere and ate it, or let's try streamers. And they put a streamer on, and strip it through there and, get reactions that way. And I'd watch the insects under the rocks and, that sort of thing. So,
observation. And it's so funny because it's something that I noticed is regularly lacking on the river. Excuse me here.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Is everyone's always, and like myself, I said with my casting, everyone's in such a hurry to get fly to the water that a lot of people don't take the time just to see what's happening first.
Yeah. Yeah. That brings me to casting. Perfect. So you're a certified casting instructor with the Federation. I am too. And nice. And I wanted to ask you, what advice, because I have a lot of folks that are, practicing and wanting to become a casting instructor. And so what advice could you give them as they're trying to do, get their casting certification?
Yes. Go into it expecting to fail.
For sure.
Go in, fail, and be okay with it. That's okay.
Yes.
And then you've got the experience, and then you'll know what you need to fine tune next time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't tell you how much I practiced, it's crazy how much practice you do, just to get that certification and be able to do all the things. What was the most difficult cast for you, or different teaching task for you? Can you remember? Explaining
and understanding the physics. And to be fair, I probably shouldn't have passed my, the year that I did. I did, and because technically I could, but looking back now at what I know now and my understanding of the physics and even my casting stroke today, it's just vastly different. Yeah. Let me think. What the hardest part for me was being able to be concise enough with my words. Because you can tell even all these years later talking to me, I get very excited. I speak very fast, very enthusiastic. I jumble, I kind of bounce around. And when you're explaining casting to a beginner, which is what, why you're getting your certification, all it takes is for you to glance in the other direction to throw them off. So you need to be able to explain what it is that they're looking for in chunks and, be the Ernest Hemingway of teaching, where you choose just the right words for the moment and then choose your words. I'm even doing it now. I'm over talking. Choose the right amount of words in the moment, full stop.
Yeah. If someone wanted to go fishing in, where you're from, how good of a caster do they have to be?
Oh, well, now with Skagit lines, the monkey can cast. I feel like
That's a good.
I'm serious. I feel like my 6-year-old daughter, who is not a monkey, by the way, but she acts like one, but she could roll a Skagit line out and make it happen.
Yeah.
Look, I don't think that it's that hard as such. I feel like maybe getting to the spots might be hard in certain rivers.
Okay.
Right? But that's all fixable with a little raft and some adventure.
Yeah. What about when you go saltwater fishing? How good of a caster do you have to be?
Yeah, that's a different story.
Okay.
So, especially because when you're swinging a fly, and this is arguable. Some people say the cast doesn't matter. It does matter to a degree, because yes, even if your fly does land in a jumble and you're swinging it out and the current's going to correct it for you, you still need to be consistent. If you want to learn and better understand what it is you're doing right and wrong, and more importantly, understand how to read water, then you do need to be consistent. Whether it is consistently casting at 15 feet or consistently casting at 65 feet, you need to be able to be competent enough to be consistent and understand the physics enough to be able to maintain consistency. So it does matter in some ways. With saltwater fishing, and even, let's say, trout fishing where you're sight fishing, your casting is everything, because you have one shot. And you have one shot oftentimes in seconds. And you could be mid-cast, as you know, that a wind gust will come through, and you need to figure out in that moment, what am I going to do to adjust this so that it lands where I need it to in the way that I need it to land. So yeah, it matters. It does matter.
You've literally, from when I've done my research on you, you've literally fly fished all over the world, right?
Yeah, at this point.
Yeah. And so what fish do you think is the most difficult?
Ooh, permit still get me.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
As far, because look, I could say things like milkfish and stuff, but as far as a feeding fish that really makes me work for them at this point, I'd say for me personally, and it's different for everybody, for me, it'd be the permit. Yeah.
I went to Ishlac, Mexico, and I fished for one, got one, but the rest of the week I didn't.
Right.
I had a couple shots, but oh my God, that's a blast. I love that kind of fishing.
Yeah. They just think about those big eyes, and they and you can't make any mistakes.
Yeah. So what if you're fishing in that kind of a situation, for the listeners, what kind of cast do you have to do for that? I mean, what would you recommend that they know if they were to go on a trip to go fishing for saltwater species like that? Like, what cast is essential? Oh my God, that's
a loaded question. Are we fishing are we on a flat?
Let's say permit or bonefish.
On a flat, bright day. Are you in a boat? Are you on foot? Also it's just keeping in mind all the different scenarios.
Yeah.
I would say that every angler needs to be able to understand how to work with the wind, probably is a big one for me.
Yep.
And this is all stuff I've had to learn the hard way, and probably have looked like a bit of an ass trying to figure out over the years, especially with a larger, heavier fly. Is your leader really long? Are they really spooky fish? Is your leader long? Do you need to know how to be able to present a longer leader, heavier fly? So my advice to every angler, something that I think could probably go, I think this is probably pretty universal, would be to understand the Belgian cast, or like a circle cast, or something where you can be able to kind of keep constant tension and get your fly through the wind, or be able to cast a really big fly.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about your podcast.
Sure.
Real quick. I'm a fan.
And I feel awful that I'm talking about me the whole time. Do you know how awkward this is for me? I want to be like, as an interviewer, I really want to ask you a bunch of questions, and I'm feeling it's exciting to talk about myself, but at the same time, it's very strange.
Yeah. Well,
and I'm one of those people where I will hang up with you and be like, why did I say that? Oh, I'm an idiot.
Good.
You sound like...
No, it's all good. I'm when I'm looking at videos of you and, researching you, I'm just like writing all these questions down that I would, that I think that people would want to know, and coming from you, and especially the lady listeners out there, for sure. It's really cool. So your podcast, I'm a fan. I'm looking at all the episodes. I think you have like 228 episodes. Your last one was with Dick Hogan. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah.
And the amount of information is mind-boggling on your podcast. All the people that you've talked to, isn't that cool?
It is the most fulfilling thing. Yeah. And do you know what is my favorite part about it? And I was telling, because I haven't aired my last 2 episodes yet, but I've interviewed. So this week I interviewed Jake Jordan, and last week I interviewed Jack Dennis. And it's so interesting to hear all the timelines from people around the world and over the last century.
Yeah.
If somebody wanted to commit and listen to 228 episodes, you could see where the whole industry ties together. It's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely, huh? For sure.
It's a timeline, yeah.
So what do you think, man? What do you think that makes your podcast so successful? I know it's your personality, of course, but what else? What else about it? Because I think you go into other stuff. Yeah,
I don't think it's my personality. I think about this sometimes, and I think it's just. And this is something you do well, by the way. I think it's just listening.
Yes.
I think that it's hard today for a lot of people to just listen, and I know even myself, now being interviewed by someone who listens, it makes me want to keep talking because I'm not used to someone listening. Even my own husband, I'm like, I have to talk really fast to say what I want to say before he cuts me off.
That's funny, yeah.
We just live in this, or like my sister, I love her to bits, but she's one of those people who smiles and goes, the whole time. And you're like, are you actually listening? Or are you just saying, So I think that there's a skill nowadays where so many of us are we forget what it feels like to just have somebody listen. And so when someone does do that, they feel inclined to share. And I really do believe it's just that simple. It's not me. It's really not me. It's not my personality. It's none of that stuff. Yeah. I think I just genuinely listen.
Yeah. I mean, you're really, from podcasts I've listened to, you're really interested too in what they have to say. And it makes it interesting for the listener for sure. I think that, being a guide, I've done a lot of listening, and it's like we become almost like therapists in a way.
Totally,
right? And so many times I've been on the stream and I've sat with my client and just talked, and whatever they wanted to get out, and we were just catch a fish and then sit on the bank and talk, and I think that that's why I listen so much, I guess. I don't know. But so yeah, let's talk about this really cool concept that you have on your website called Masterclass. Whose idea was that, and how cool is that? What is that?
Yeah.
Tell people what that is.
So basically with Anchored, it was obviously all audio.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times my guests would be explaining with their hands. Even just now, we are speaking about a cast, and I so desperately want to dive into a whole hour topic with you about the Belgian cast where I could demonstrate and explain physics. But I know that we're on audio. So I thought, well, everyone would like to see what they're talking about. Bob Clay was talking about building a bamboo rod and all the visuals that were missing. So when people would say, what about video or putting it on YouTube? I thought, okay, well, why don't we just take it one step further? Why don't we do full on classes? But they're a fortune. To make a masterclass costs thousands upon thousands of dollars. And so even if it's a small class, even if it's a 10 chapter class, a mini course, it still costs thousands of dollars for, to get it done properly.
Yeah.
As far as, videography goes. And so the only way to be able to afford that, as much as I love the industry and fly fishing, I feel like I funded enough of the industry out of my own pocket as far as, because I don't it's not like the show is making a fortune or any of the other things that I do, but I needed to be able to pay for the classes. So I started a membership. And so Anchored turned into Anchored Outdoors. And now it's a membership it's a community of just I cannot say enough about our members. I mean, I say our because it's just me running it, but I feel like Anchored Outdoors is a whole community. Mm-hmm. It's not just one person. And so that's kind of where it's at now. It's a membership platform, and members pay an annual fee, and it opens up the doors to the classes, interactive events, very intimate one-on-one questions with all of our instructors, hosted trips, giveaways, content library, all the stuff that you would expect in a membership.
And you got still water type classes on there, to casting classes. What else do you have on there?
Yes, we were able to get Brian Chan, Phil Rowley, just flew back from Montana, did Kelly Gallup's streamer class, Bob Clay's bamboo class, got Stephen Drake to do our shed hunting class.
That's awesome.
Some of the, like things that are just kind of interesting. We've got, I'm confident to say, the best hide tanning of all things, like buckskin class on the internet for sure, hands down. I will guarantee it 100% if anyone wants to give it a try. With Natalie Bogwalker, some of the classes are a little random. And admittedly, the focus moving forward over the last few years has just been fly fishing because it's what members want. But it's kind of a random mix. And I'm always open for more ideas if anyone wants to shoot me a couple suggestions.
Are you traveling with like a film crew and filming these folks?
Sometimes, not always. It just depends. With COVID, we were still able to operate, and I wasn't able to be there for those classes. But Will Phelps is our camera guy, or he does probably most of the American classes now. And I enjoy him so much that I will be going out of my way to be on location for classes going forward.
Kelly Gallup's a cool dude, huh?
Yeah, they're so funny. Went straight from him straight to Rooster. And wow, what an experience.
Yeah. I've had a couple beers with Kelly in the past. He's a character for sure. Good
and
guy.
He's fit.
Yeah.
He is so fit. Do you know he was a pro bodybuilder?
Is that right?
Yeah, and I'm talking like Schwarzenegger. You should see the photos.
Oh, really? How funny.
Yeah, in our masterclass, so when we filmed it, in his intro chapter, he was explaining his past, and he's allowed us to share this photo that we have of him, and it is next level. Wait till you see it.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. And I got to tell you this one. So I interviewed Brian O'Keefe, and I'm a smallmouth geek. I love fishing for smallmouth. And so I asked Brian, he's been all over the world like you, and I go, what if you had one last place you could go fly fishing, where would you go and why? And he's all, I'd go to the Boundary Waters in Minnesota and fish for smallmouth. I'm like, no way. And he's all,
he would too.
I go, that's awesome, man. I go, I love smallmouth. He's all, guy, you got to go do it. So that's on my bucket list for sure. But that's my question to you. So like, what if you had one last place you could go fishing, where would it go? Where would you go?
Well, am I going to die? Is that why it's
well, you can't. Let's just say that. You have one last place you can go, like one last meal, but like one last place you can go and experience and go back to or whatever. Where would you go?
Yeah, the Dean.
Okay.
It just Colby was love of my life, my dog, and he and I kind of grew into what the beings we were going to be there. And so Colby, my sister, Stevie, the fish, the figuring myself out. That's where I figured out that I wanted to do the podcast. Just everything happened. I fell in love because when I met Charles in Norway, I had one spot left on the Dean. And so Charles, I was like, we should buy the spot. And so he did. And then he came into the Dean, and we just absolutely fell madly in love. And so everything apart from my daughter is there. So definitely the Dean, hands down. Lower Dean.
The way you describe it, it sounds pretty magical. Like
it really is.
You got to go back. So I'm putting that on my list right there. Let me write that down.
Yes, and so much so, in fact, that I'm saving it because we've got our 10-year anniversary, and we're like, well, where should we go? Should we go back to Norway? Should we do the Dean? And we really want to save the Dean and not even financially, but just from an experiential stance. We want to save it for the right year. So that is kind of where I'm planning to take my last trip, I guess.
Awesome. So if listeners want to, check you out and what you have to offer, your website and socials, where would they go?
Oh, well, hopefully you just come to me directly. I don't think I'm as busy as everyone thinks I am these days. Because everything is so automated. The membership is automated. It's been going for a few years now. Everyone who's wanted to really get to me has got to me. I would just email me directly at april@anchoredoutdoors.com. And then what's really cool, actually, I have not announced this yet, but it's exciting. So when I say we, Dika, my developer, and I, we are changing everything now so that the membership is free, not the classes. Like I said, I need to be able to, I need to pay for them and eat. But the master, I think what we're doing is you basically get the content library for free. You get access to me and most of our instructors. You get access to all of our interactive events. We've got 2 a month. Access to being, the host of trips if you want to come. We have a members only podcast. There are a ton of perks to being even a free member. And not only that, but the membership is set up with points. So you can get paid to be, every point is worth $1 US. And so you can literally get paid to be a free member on the site.
Oh, that's cool.
And then use it to buy classes or whatever you'd like. So we haven't set that up yet, but if you would like a free membership, just email me at april@anchoredoutdoors.com and I will set you up.
So that's the website, anchoredoutdoors.com.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then what about like your socials and stuff? Like if they want to see you on Instagram or anything?
Oh yeah, those. I started to really hate social media, and this is literally my first. But I'm back now. I feel like the last few months I finally have stepped back into it. I'm not overly stoked about it. Even I published my Montana vlog on YouTube the other day, like 4 days ago, and it went, I guess, viral for my channel because usually it doesn't. But like mini viral, but viral enough for me to be like, oh shit, this isn't good, because then you get all these idiots, right? And I'm reading the comments. There's like, what? Some guy last night was like, "You're no apostrophe, by the way. You're a poser," and I'm going, Are we still doing that, you guys? I'm over 40 now. Are we still doing this? So there's a love and hate relationship with social, but I am back and unbothered for the most part. And you can find me on Instagram at April Vokey or on Facebook at April Vokey. And the YouTube channel is actually really cool because I've now started posting the podcast and my vlogs and free chapters from masterclasses. So as much as I despise YouTube sometimes, it's a great way to find a lot of free content. Very
cool. So cool. Well, April, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge on my podcast and being on my podcast. What a pleasure. What an honor.
Oh, no. Thank you for having me and listening to me ramble 100 miles a minute.
I love it. And I learned a lot, and that's what my podcast is all about.
Love it. Well, stay in touch, and I'm sure that we will be in touch soon about maybe guest podcasting. Sounds great. Okay. Thanks so much, Guy. I'll talk to you later. All right. Bye-bye.
It's a Guy Jeans podcast.